I slapped my teenage son during an argument and he left. 4 years later I discovered the shocking truth about why he really ran away. I've been married to Susan, 45 female, for 24 years. We have 2 kids, David, 22 male, and Heather, 16 female. I thought we had a happy family until everything fell apart 4 years ago. I grew up in a working-class neighborhood in Chicago. My parents were immigrants who worked multiple jobs to make ends meet. From a young age, I saw how hard they struggled and vowed to create a better life for myself. I threw myself into my studies, often staying up late to finish homework after helping at my parents' small convenience store. My dedication paid off when I got a scholarship to a state university. That's where I met Susan. She came from a wealthy suburb and had never wanted for anything. We were opposites in many ways, but I was drawn to her carefree spirit and she seemed to admire my ambition. After graduation, I started working at a marketing firm while developing a business plan on the side. Susan moved in with me, but struggled to find a job. Those first few years were tough. I was working long hours at the firm and every spare moment on my business idea. Susan grew restless and complained about our small apartment and lack of social life. When I was 25, I took the plunge and quit my job to focus on my business full-time. It was terrifying, but Susan supported the decision. Those early days were a roller coaster. Some weeks I'd land a big client and we'd celebrate. Other weeks I'd lie awake wondering how we'd make rent. Slowly but surely, the business grew. By the time we got married at 23, things were stable enough that we could buy a small house in the suburbs. A year later, David was born. I'll never forget holding David for the first time. I promised myself I'd always be there for him in a way my own father, who was always working, couldn't be for me. Susan had some health complications after the birth, so I took on most of the childcare duties those first few months. I'd bring David to the office with me, bouncing him on my knee during client calls. As David grew, we remained close. Every Sunday was our day. When he was little, we'd go to the park or build Lego towers. As he got older, we'd shoot hoops or work on his beat-up first car together. I loved how his eyes would light up when he finally got something to work. Susan, on the other hand, always seemed to struggle to connect with David. She'd make plans to take him shopping or to a movie, but would often cancel at the last minute. When David was about 10, I overheard him telling a friend that his mom didn't like him. It broke my heart. I tried talking to Susan about it, but she'd get defensive and say I was overreacting. When David was 14, Heather was born. The pregnancy was a surprise, we hadn't planned on more kids. But from the moment Susan held Heather, something changed. She doted on Heather in a way she never had with David. She'd spend hours playing dress-up or having tea parties, things she'd always complained about doing with David when he was little. The difference in how she treated our kids was stark. She'd praise every scribble of Heather's, but barely glance at David's report card full of A's. When David made the varsity basketball team sophomore year, Susan skipped his first game for one of Heather's playmates. I made excuses for her, telling David that mom was just tired or busy. But I saw the hurt in his eyes. As David entered his teens, he started to pull away from me. He spent more time with friends and seemed moody a lot. I figured it was normal teenage stuff and tried to give him space. Heather was still young and needed more hands-on attention anyway. Looking back, I wish I'd pushed harder to stay connected with David during those years. Things came to a head when David was 18. I had been away on a business trip, trying to land a big client that would take the company to the next level. When I got home, I walked into chaos. There was broken glass on the kitchen floor and I could hear Susan and David screaming at each other upstairs. When David saw me, his anger turned on me. He started yelling that I was a coward and a terrible father. He said he hated both of us and wished he'd never been born. I was in shock, trying to understand what was happening. Susan kept telling David to stop talking about our marriage, which confused me even more. In the heat of the moment, I did something I'll regret for the rest of my life. I slapped David. In 18 years, I had never laid a hand on my son. The look of hurt and betrayal in his eyes will haunt me forever. He ran to his room and refused to speak to me. An hour later, Susan's parents showed up. Apparently David had called them to come get him. He had a duffel bag packed and walked out without saying a word to me. I tried to apologize, to get him to talk to me, but he wouldn't even look in my direction. For months after that, I called and texted David daily. I left voicemails apologizing, begging him to talk to me, telling him how much I loved him. He never responded. The only contact we had was through his grandparents to arrange paying for his college tuition. It's been 4 years now. David is about to graduate college with a degree in engineering. I'm still sending him messages every few weeks, telling him how proud I am and how much I miss him. He's never replied. Yesterday was Heather's 16th birthday. She spent the day with David at an amusement park. When she came home, she seemed upset. After some prodding, she told me that David had sent me emails years ago explaining why he left, but I never responded. I was confused because I checked my email religiously for work and never saw anything from David. Then I remembered an old email account I used to use, linked to a long-abandoned Facebook profile. With shaking hands, I logged in. There, sitting in the inbox, were several emails from David over the years. As I read them, I felt like I was going to be sick. David wrote that the night of our big fight, he had come home early from school and found Susan in bed with another man. When he confronted her, she first tried to play it off like nothing happened. Then she threatened him, saying if he told me it would destroy our family. She told him I had been cheating on my work trips for years and that we had an open marriage. David was disgusted and felt betrayed by both of us, which is why he lashed out that night. In his emails, David said he wanted to tell me the truth so many times over the years. But he was afraid I wouldn't believe him over Susan. He felt guilty for cutting me off but said he couldn't stand to be around Susan anymore knowing what she'd done. I'm in shock. I've never cheated on Susan. We absolutely do not have an open marriage. She manipulated our son and destroyed my relationship with him. I've missed out on 4 years of his life because of her lies. I don't know what to do now. Should I confront Susan? How do I even begin to repair things with David? I feel like my whole life has been a lie. Update 1. It's been a week since my last post. Thank you all for your advice and support. It's been the hardest week of my life, but I wanted to update you on what's happened. The day after I posted, I confronted Susan. I tried to stay calm and give her a chance to come clean. I asked her if there was anything she needed to tell me about the night David left. At first, she played dumb, asking what I was talking about. When I pressed her, she got defensive and accused me of not trusting her. Finally, I told her I'd read the emails from David. The color drained from her face. She started crying and admitted it was all true. Between sobs, she told me she'd been having an affair with a coworker for about 6 months when David caught them. She said she panicked and lied to David about us having an open marriage because she was terrified of losing me and breaking up our family. I asked her why she never told me the truth, even after David left. She said she convinced herself it would blow over, that David would come back and we could all pretend it never happened. When he didn't, she was too ashamed to admit what she'd done. She begged me to forgive her, swearing it was a one-time mistake and she'd ended the affair immediately after David caught her. I was too angry to even look at her. I told her I needed time to think and left to stay with my younger brother, Mark, for a few days. Mark and his wife were shocked when I told them what happened. They've always thought of Susan as the perfect wife and mother. Mark encouraged me to reach out to David. With my heart pounding, I sent David a long email. I explained that I had only just found his messages and that I never knew the truth about what happened. I apologized for not believing him and for everything he went through. I told him how much I love him and miss him, and that I'd understand if he didn't want to talk to me, but I hoped we could reconnect. To my surprise, David called me the next day. We were both emotional. He said he had wanted to tell me the truth for years but was afraid I wouldn't believe him over Susan. He felt guilty for cutting me off but said he couldn't stand to be around Susan anymore knowing what she'd done. We talked for hours. David filled me in on more details about that night and the following days. Apparently, Susan had threatened to cut him off financially if he told me the truth. She manipulated him into keeping quiet by saying it would destroy our family and ruin Heather's life. David was only 18 and about to start college. He was scared of losing everything. David told me he's been seeing a therapist for the past year, which has helped him process everything that happened. He said he misses me and wants to rebuild our relationship, but it will take time. We agreed to start with weekly phone calls and maybe meet up in person in a few months when things aren't so raw. I also had a long talk with Heather. She admitted that she's known the truth for about a year. David had confided in her during one of their secret meetings, but made her promise not to tell me. She's been torn between loyalty to her brother and not wanting to hurt me. I assured her that none of this was her fault and that I'm glad she and David have stayed close. Heather told me more about her relationship with David over the past few years. Apparently they've been meeting up every few months in secret. David didn't want to put Heather in the middle, but he missed her too much to stay away completely. Heather said she's always felt caught between us all, trying to keep everyone happy. I feel terrible that she's had to carry this burden. After a lot of soul searching, I've decided I can't stay married to Susan. The betrayal and years of manipulation are too much to forgive. When I returned home, I told her I want a divorce. She broke down, begging me to reconsider. She suggested marriage counseling and swore she'd do anything to make it right. But my mind is made up. I'm meeting with a lawyer next week to discuss my options. Susan and I have built a life together over 24 years, so untangling everything will be complicated. We own the house together and she's been a stay-at-home mom since Heather was born. I'm worried she'll try to take half my business in the divorce. David graduates college in a month. He's invited me to attend the ceremony. It will be the first time I've seen him in person in 4 years. I'm nervous but excited to start rebuilding our bond. Susan asked if she could come too, but David said he's not ready to see her yet. I'm still processing everything and figuring out how to move forward. But I'm relieved to finally know the truth and to be talking to my son again. Thank you all again for your support during this difficult time. I'll update again after David's graduation. Update 2. It's been about 2 months since my last update. A lot has happened, so I wanted to fill you all in. The divorce process with Susan is underway and it's been even messier than I anticipated. She's fighting me on everything. She's trying to get half of my business, claiming she supported me while I built it up. My lawyer assures me she doesn't have a strong case since she was never involved in the day-to-day operations, but it's still stressful. Susan is also pushing for primary custody of Heather, saying she's been the primary caregiver all these years while I focused on work. Heather is old enough to have a say, and she's told the lawyer she wants to live with me. I think Susan was shocked by that. The hardest part has been watching Heather struggle with everything. She's angry at Susan for lying all these years, but she's also sad to see our family fall apart. She's been having trouble at school, her grades are slipping and she got caught skipping class last week. I've arranged for her to start seeing a therapist to help her process everything. The one bright spot in all of this has been reconnecting with David. I attended his college graduation last month. Seeing him walk across that stage to get his engineering degree was one of the proudest moments of my life. We had dinner afterwards and talked for hours. It felt like old times in some ways, but there's still some awkwardness between us. David told me more about the past 4 years. He struggled with depression and anxiety after cutting ties with us. He felt guilty for leaving Heather behind, but he couldn't bear to be around Susan. He threw himself into his studies as a distraction. He said there were many nights he almost called me, but he was afraid of being hurt again. I learned that David has been dating someone for the past 2 years. Her name is Olivia and she sounds wonderful. They met in an engineering class and bonded over their shared love of restoring old cars. David says she's been a huge support for him through everything. He wants me to meet her soon. We've been having our weekly phone calls as planned. Sometimes we just chat about everyday stuff, his new job, the fixer-upper house he's buying, a movie he saw. Other times we dive into heavier topics. David is still working through his anger towards Susan. He says he's not ready to see her yet, which I completely understand. I've been doing a lot of soul searching about my role in all of this. While I know Susan's affair and lies are not my fault, I've realized there were signs I missed over the years. I was so focused on work and providing for my family that I didn't see what was happening right under my nose. I'm trying to be more present now, especially with Heather. I've cut back my work hours to spend more time with Heather. We've been having father-daughter movie nights every week. I'm trying to get to know her friends and interests better. I realized I don't even know her favorite subject in school or what kind of music she likes. I'm making an effort to change that. Susan moved out of our house last week. It feels strange living here alone with Heather. There are so many memories in this house, both good and bad. I'm thinking about selling it and buying a smaller place once the divorce is final. I think we could use a fresh start. That's all for now. I'll update again when there are major developments. Thank you all for your continued support and advice through this difficult time. Update 3. It's been about 6 months since my last update. The divorce is finally settled. It was a long and draining process, but it's over. Susan ended up getting less than she wanted in the settlement. My lawyer was able to prove that her contributions to my business were minimal. She got the house in exchange for a smaller share of my company's value. David and I continue to rebuild our relationship. We talk on the phone at least once a week and try to get together in person at least once a month. We've had some difficult conversations about the past. He's expressed anger that I didn't notice something was wrong all those years ago. I've apologized and we're working through it. We're planning a fishing trip next month, something we used to do when he was younger. David suggested inviting Heather along too. I think it will be good for all of us to spend some quality time together as a family. I finally met David's girlfriend Olivia. She came with him to a barbecue at my new place last month. She's smart, kind, and clearly adores David. It's obvious how much she's helped him over the past few years. Seeing David happy and in a healthy relationship has been wonderful. Heather is doing a bit better. She's still in therapy, which seems to be helping her process everything. Her grades have improved and she hasn't skipped any classes lately. She's spending more time with David now too, which I think has been good for both of them. Susan has been trying to reconcile with both kids. Heather is cautiously rebuilding a relationship with her. They've gone shopping together a few times and Susan attended Heather's last soccer game. David is still not ready to see Susan. He says maybe someday, but not now. I've started dating again, which feels strange after 24 years of marriage. A colleague set me up with her sister, Lisa. We've been on a few dates and I like her, but I'm taking it slow. I'm being careful not to introduce her to Heather until I'm sure it's serious. Work has been busy. I landed a big new client last month, which has kept me working late some nights. I'm trying to find a balance between growing the business and being there for my kids. It's not always easy, but I'm doing my best. Heather's 17th birthday is coming up next month. She wants to have a small party at the new house. David is coming into town for it. It will be the first time in years that the three of us will be together for a family celebration. I'm both excited and nervous about it. I'm still processing everything that's happened over the past year. Some days I wake up and it all feels like a bad dream. Other days, the anger and hurt are still fresh. I'm trying to focus on moving forward and rebuilding relationships with my kids. Susan reached out last week asking to meet for coffee. She says she has some things she wants to tell me about the affair and why it happened. Part of me wants answers, but another part isn't sure if knowing more details will help or just open old wounds. I haven't decided if I'll meet with her yet. Overall, life is settling into a new normal. There are still hard days, but I'm hopeful for the future. I'm grateful to have both my children back in my life. Whatever happens next, I know we'll face it together as a family. Thank you all for your support throughout this journey. Your advice and kind words have meant more than you know. I may post another update after Heather's birthday party, but for now, I'm just taking things one day at a time.